You've outlined an 8-point strategy to manage China relations. How should Australia go about repairing the relationship?
Well, I think it's very important here, Danica, to recognise that China today is a much different country to what it was 20 years ago, even to what it was 10 years ago. It's a more powerful country, it's a more nationalistic country, it's more assertive about pressing its claims in the international sphere. And the fact that we're finding this a harder relationship to manage should not come as a surprise. And in fact, around the world, countries around the world are having the same sorts of difficulties and tensions in their relationship. So we should continue to pursue a constructive relationship with China, but I think we'll need to be patient in many respects. And, we'll also need to continue to outline our red lines and non-negotiable demands and defend our sovereignty, but make clear that we do seek a constructive, pragmatic relationship with China based upon where we've got mutual interest. That's always the basis of interaction between nations.
Well, in terms of that approach, you're calling for Australia to call out attempts by Beijing to interfere in Australia. Why does being more frank work?
Well, I think my point here is that, the public, particularly in a society such as ours, with a democratic government such as ours, the public deserves to be levelled with about some of the challenges, and I think our political leadership has done that. We haven't shied away from making clear that there are tensions in the relationship, whether it's the Prime Minister, the Foreign Minister or the Trade Minister, making clear there are difficulties in the relationship, but making clear what the basis of some of those difficulties are. And they are things that go to the heart of our sovereignty or our national character as an independent state. And I think this is why when the public sees turbulence in the relationship, they need to have a sense of what's happening there that's causing this. And I think this is why it's important that we do continue to explain this issue to the public, continue to explain that this is not necessarily an easy time in the relationship, but also to dispel this idea that there might be some sort of magical reset button or a silver bullet. That's not the case here. This is going to be a relationship that takes some work and some patience in the years ahead.
Some leaders over recent weeks, various premiers, they're calling for caution and better dialogue. So why do you think your idea is the better approach?
Look, I wouldn't presume to say that, I've got all the answers here. I just tried to lay out some of the challenges and difficulties in the relationship. I'm certainly in favour of more dialogue. The government is, we've made clear on a number of occasions, both publicly but also, through diplomatic channels, that our ministers would like to have a dialogue with China, because dialogue is the only way that you resolve some of these differences, or at least figure out a way to move forward through them. We still have a very strong structural basis to our relationship with China. It's driven by the fact that we've got complementary economies. We've still got a very strong trading relationship. We've still got a very strong desire to travel and visit between one another's countries. And ultimately, in my view, those things are going to reassert themselves, because those things are always the basis for nations interacting with one another. Nations interact with one another on the basis of interest, not sentiment or goodwill. They deal with one another because it's in their mutual interest to do so. And there's a reason the Australia-China relationship is as intense as it is, and it's because of that mutuality of interests.
Is there a mutuality of interests anymore, though, Dave Sharma? Is there any one party to blame, then, for the breakdown in this relationship?
Look, firstly, I wouldn't characterise it as a breakdown. I think there's a tendency, in Australia sometimes to over-dramatise these things. This is not a breakdown. This is not a crisis. This is a difficult patch in a very complicated relationship. We're talking about two countries that are vastly different in size, that have vastly different political systems, vastly different histories and vastly different outlooks on the world. So it shouldn't come as any surprise that from time to time we have difficult patches in this relationship. But I think it's important, and this is where we certainly take the view that we seek to work through those constructively, where we should be pragmatic in recognising that some of these differences are quite deep, wide and fundamental, but there's nonetheless areas of mutual interest and where we can cooperate and where we should be working together. And I think that has always been the basis of our relationship with China in the past. It's been founded upon mutual interest, but a recognition of differences and a respectful airing of those differences. And I think that's what I certainly hope we can get back to.
All right, just finally, in terms of the Foreign Relations Bill that's set to pass Parliament, it would give Commonwealth power to override trade deals done by state governments. Dave Sharma, if it passes, should the government step in and tear up the Belt and Road deal Victoria has done with China?
Look, I'm not going to preempt what the federal government should and shouldn't do once this legislation passes, but it is a very important tool. I think overwhelmingly, we'll find that agreements that states and territories have concluded with overseas counterparts are in the national interest and welcome. I mean, generally Australia's an outward-oriented nation. We welcome this sort of international engagement. But there will be some instances where what a particular part of government is seeking to do is not consistent with our foreign policy objectives as a nation and can potentially undermine those. And that's why this bill is important. It gives us an important tool to ensure consistency in the conduct of our international relations.